All right, let's dive into one of World War II's absolute weirdest stories. We're not going to Europe, we're not going to the Pacific, we're heading straight to Los Angeles for an event that is still baffling people today.
So, picture this. It's the middle of the night, February 25th, 1942, and suddenly the skies over LA just explode. Anti-aircraft guns start roaring, firing over 1,400 artillery shells into the dark. So, the question is, what on earth were they shooting at? What kind of enemy attack would cause that kind of insane citywide barrage?
And here's the crazy part. Nothing. When the sun came up, when all the smoke cleared, there was absolutely zero evidence of an attack. No crashed planes, no debris, no wreckage, just a city completely terrified by its own defenses.
To really solve this mystery of the Phantom Raid, you've got to get inside the heads of the people on the ground that night. Because what happened up in the sky was all about what was happening in their minds.
And here's the truly tragic irony. No enemy bombs fell, but people still died. We're talking 6 civilians, not from an attack, but from the sheer chaos. 3 people were killed in car wrecks during the citywide blackout, and 3 more died from heart attacks, literally scared to death by the hour-long bombardment.
You know, this night of absolute panic didn't just pop up out of nowhere. No, it was the explosive finale to months of fear that had the entire West Coast just completely on edge.
Just look at how fast this all went down. 10 weeks after Pearl Harbor showed everyone that America wasn't invincible, a Japanese submarine actually fires on the California coast. Now, it didn't do much damage, but psychologically, it was huge. And then, the very next day, President Roosevelt himself gets on the radio and tells the whole country to get ready for more attacks. It was like a powder keg just waiting for a spark.
And LA really felt like it had a giant target painted on its back. It was the heart of the West Coast war effort, full of aircraft factories, naval bases, you name it. But here's the kicker. Its defenses were shockingly bad. The city knew it was a prime target, and that created this intense paranoia.
Okay, so we've set the stage, this atmosphere of pure terror. Now, let's jump back into that night and look at the timeline, because this is how a single blip on a radar screen spiraled into a full-blown battle against, well, the sky.
You can just see it spiraling out of control, right? An early false alarm puts everyone on a hair trigger. Then, boom, 2:25 a.m., radar gets a hit. That's the spark. Searchlights start sweeping the sky, and soon enough, operators are screaming that they see objects. By 3:16 a.m., the order comes down, open fire. And for the next hour, it's just total chaos.
I mean, just try to put yourself there for a second. You're woken up by air raid sirens for the second time in one night. The entire city goes pitch black. And then, for more than an hour, all you hear is the thunder of artillery, and all you see are these giant searchlight beams and tracer bullets crisscrossing the sky. It must have felt like the end of the world was happening right over your head.
So, the next morning, the sun comes up and a terrified public is demanding answers. But what they got instead were 2 completely different, totally contradictory stories from the military. And that just made the mystery even deeper.
This is just perfect. The head of the Navy, Frank Knox, basically says, it was a false alarm, just a case of jittery nerves, which, you can imagine, did not go over well. But then the Army, who, fired all the shells, said, no, there were absolutely planes up there, and our heroic barrage drove them away.
So how? How is it possible that 2 branches of the U.S. military could have completely different takes on what just happened? Was it a false alarm or a real raid? Jittery nerves or heroic defense? Well, the answer historians have landed on is kind of both, and also neither.
So let's get to the bottom of it. What really happened that night? Well, after decades of digging into it, we've pieced together a really clear and pretty fascinating picture of how this whole Phantom Raid came to be.
And the key thing to remember is this. It all started with a technological ghost. Radar back in 1942 was brand new stuff, and it was super unreliable. It could be tricked by weather, by atmospheric weirdness, anything. That first radar blip, almost certainly just a phantom on the screen. So here's how that little ghost on a screen turns into an all-out battle. That false radar contact puts everyone on high alert. So the searchlight guys are desperately scanning the sky, and what do they lock onto? Weather balloons. Then the first gun battery opens fire, and that's when a chain reaction starts. Other gunners see the bright flashes from those first shells exploding, and they mistake them for enemy planes and start shooting at them. creating this crazy self-sustaining light show.
And this is where psychology comes in, with this fascinating thing called expectation bias. See, the soldiers weren't incompetent or crazy, they were just human. They had been trained for weeks to expect an attack. So under incredible stress, in the dark, with explosions going off everywhere, their brains basically filled in the blanks and showed them exactly what they expected and feared they would see.
And that just sums it up perfectly. The real enemy over Los Angeles that night wasn't from Japan. It was a projection of their own fear. They were firing at shadows, at their own shell bursts, and at the terrifying images that were already in their heads.
So the shooting finally stopped that night, but believe me, the story was far from over. The whole thing left a military legacy, for sure, but it also took on this bizarre second life decades later in a totally different way.
In the short term, the military actually learned some tough lessons. The whole incident was, frankly, deeply embarrassing. But it did expose huge problems with their communication and coordination, which led to some really important reforms. But as the war got bigger, the Battle of LA just kind of got swept under the rug as a weird footnote.
But then, fast forward to the 1980s, and the story gets resurrected by UFO enthusiasts. They looked at this unexplained event, a massive military barrage against an enemy nobody could find, and they reinterpreted it as proof of an alien visit. And of course, a huge government cover-up.
And this is the reason the story just won't die. This one single, incredibly dramatic photograph, you've probably seen it. It shows all these searchlights converging on something. And it's still passed around today as evidence of a UFO. The visual mystery is so powerful, it just keeps fueling those conspiracy theories.
When you really boil it all down, the Battle of Los Angeles is so much more than a weird historical anecdote. It's a powerful lesson in how collective fear works. It's a reminder that when things get stressful, whether it's the fog of war or the flood of misinformation online, that line between what's real and what we perceive can get blurry, proving that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one we imagine into existence.